3 exciting words for you. Clay, ghosty, mushrooms! So here are the things I'll be using today. I've got my trusty board, which is essentially a piece of wood covered in a bin bag and stuck down with some masking tape. I have a little bowl of warmish water, which I can dunk my fingers into and use it to smooth the clay. I have a little rolling pin. I have a few different clay tools. I always love using ones like this, with nubby nodules on their ends. The clay I'm using is white British air drying clay from Hobbycraft. To be honest, I know it's going to need a really good pummeling because it's pretty stiff. This is no shade on Hobbycraft clay at all here. I've had this tub for ages and I'm amazed it hasn't gone mouldy like some other clay that's lurking in this shed. I just need to get some moisture on it, get it moving, and I think it's going to do a pretty okay job. So let's go! This is not technically definitely what you have to do with this, but I find it satisfying. I think it's starting to look a bit better than it did, a bit less cracky. Right, let's cut some of this off. Let's have about that much and see where it takes us. Ooh. Let's roll this out a little bit. There we go. Gentle. Whoosh, whoosh. How thin is that? I'd say that's, what's that, about 5 millimeters? So this circle is going to be the top of my first ghosty mushroom, and I'm trying to figure out just how thin I can make it, because the thinner it is, the easier it will be to fold, but it's also more likely to tear. So it's a tricky balance. So while I carry on mulling that over, let's chop off another chunk and start making the stump that it will eventually sit on. Cue a few more pummeling power moves. Boof! Bada boom! I'm rolling it out, but not so thinly. This time I only want it wide enough that I can wrap it around my finger, and if it's too thin it won't be very sturdy. Now it's wide enough, I can cut off the top and the bottom so it's a bit more rectangular, and I'm shoving a bit more water on it because I can see some cracking going on and I'm not having it. Crackage be gone! So I'm using my finger as a bolster or a kind of guide, wrapping the clay around it to create what can only be described as a tube. How thrilling. I'm squishing the two ends together and smoothing the cracks as I go, but also trying not to let the tube get too, what's the word here? Shall we say loose? Why not? Now we are stuck with the idea of loose tubes, which I'm not sure what to do about. Onwards we go. So the reason I'm doing it this way, rather than just having a nice whole lump, is just to help it dry that bit quicker. If you don't mind the wait time, you can absolutely create a solid stump, and I'll be trying one of those later anyway. I don't mind the fact that this stump is a bit wonky because I think it gives it a more rustic appeal, and I'm sticking with that. Now it's tin foil time. I'm using the foil as a structural support type thingy. I'm making it into a ball and trying to get the diameter of it more or less the same size as the diameter of the stump. Then I'm putting the clay disc on top of the ball and gently pushing downwards. Gentle because I don't want that spiky foil to come through the clay or to get too embedded in it. Then in lifting it up I can manipulate it a bit more, trying to create folds and pinches in the sides. I'm not being too precise or worrying too much about it, but just keeping it relaxed and whatever. I'm aiming for a combo hybrid of the mushroom top and that classic floaty ghost-like shape. So this is what I'm going with here. I'm intending on drawing the eyes onto this one, so it doesn't really need much else doing it to it right now. It's pretty cute, I think. Yeah! I found a handy old plastic tray which I can pop the pieces onto so I can move them around easier, and I can also leave them on there to dry. I'm just adding a few little finishing touches, just smoothing out some of those folds and edges, not worrying too much if there's the odd lumps and bumps left over. And on old Stumpy, that's what I'm calling it now, I'm adding some texture with my tiny nodule stick, which is a technical term, nodule stick. holding my finger inside as a bolster and then pressing into the clay and pulling upwards with the tool. The lines can be wiggly as heck. Hurrah! Now that's my first ghosty mushroom prepped. So let's move on to the next one. I want this next one to be a bit taller and flowier, and I'm hoping I can make a sturdy enough thin stump to hold it. Anywho, first things first, let's roll out the top part. Sound like Bluey. I'm trying to go as thin as I can with this one, but also feeling quite scared about that it'll tear later. So I'm balancing the risk. This time the tin foil is going to help the clay hold up in a bit more of a flowing shape. So I'm trying to form it into a kind of cone. And I keep realising it's not big enough, so I keep adding other bits on until it seems about right. Honestly, lowering this clay onto this cone just feels worrying. There's so many chances of cracking. But the key is to just go slow. There ain't no need to rush this random craft, so just breathe, Gemma, just breathe. Gently, gently, I'm pushing the clay into folds to try and make it look like a floaty ghosty. Now that's started, I can also get the stump brewing. For this stump, I'm going to stick with a solid lump of clay, but I'm going to make it long and thin and hope to goodness that it stays standing later when it has a ghost on top of it. So here I'm just rolling out the lump until it gets to the right kind of height and whacking it down a few times to ensure it has a nice, flat, sturdy base. I'm adding on some lines again, but a bit more intentionally this time, doing some swirly, wiggly, doodads. You get the idea. I'm having one more faff about with the bottom edges of the ghosty, just encouraging them to curve up a little bit more or smoothing any more cracks. But the nice thing about these being mushroom ghosts is that any rougher edges, well, they kind of fit with the natural mushroomy vibe. And this is how it looks. I am so chuffed with it. I think it really does look like a little ghosty. So I'm thinking this side that's a bit shorter is the best side for the eyes to go. On this one, I want to create holes for the eyes. And quite honestly, this is the bit that always makes me go, ah! Because if you get the eye holes wrong, it's a bit of a faff to smooth them back over. Always mark them gently first and then go a bit deeper bit by bit. But oh my goodness, look at the cuteness. Oh, I love this little ghosty so much. I'm adding some little lines onto a few edges just as a nod to that mushroom element, and it kind of echoes what's going on in the stump too. And there we have it, 2 stumps, 2 ghosty mushroom tops, all done. I'm just going to leave them to dry and hope that nothing cracks. Oh, right, let's see whether or not they've survived. Oh, there's a little crack on that one, but looking pretty good. Let's see whether we can get the foil out. This is our stump for this one, and it's looking quite good. It does have a slight crack down here, but nothing too bad, and you can still see some of the decoration, so that's cool, and it does stand up, so that's good. Right, so this one is the one that goes with it, and yeah, you can kind of see there is some crackage going on around here. So I'm just going to have to be super careful trying to wiggle this out. It is quite tight in. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so that's how it looks inside. There is quite a lot of cracks on the inside as well. But you're not going to see those bits as much, so we could probably patch those in some way. But, you know, I think it looks pretty cute. Now, the moment of truth for this one is whether or not it's stays up on this. Oh, 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 ah! Yes, look! And he's got a little bit of a wiggle. Oh, I love it. Look at his little... Oh, it looks like he's floating around. It's so cute. Oh, oh, I just want to keep poking it. There's part of me that would really like to paint the insides like a kind of purple or something. I don't know, we might do that right at the end, but for now, haha, success with that one. And so now this one is the shorter, more dumpy stumpy. This just had the ball inside it like that, so it's not quite so much to pull out. It is still just slightly stuck, but it's come out a lot easier. This one's not as cracked either. And so let's see how we can fit, which way round we want this to... Oops, oops. Hang on a minute. We need to balance this one right. There we go. That's quite cute. It's like a little frilly baby one. I like them. Let me bring you down to ghost level. Yeah, I think they're cute. And then if I just put some little eyes on that one. So cute. Right, so here's a funny thing. I did actually really love how they looked when they were just all white, but I really had an urge to paint the inside of the bigger ghost, and because that one had a bit of an obvious crack on its head, I figured I should paint its outside too, as it might help cover the crack just that little bit. So after a little detour of sanding a few edges, I started painting. And I'd love to know what you would have done at this juncture. Would you have stopped and just left them as they were, perhaps just adding eyes to the small one and leaving it at that? Or would you have gone forth into paintland too? Because I'll be honest, I'm not sure I completely like my end painted results. I mean, I think certain bits worked and other bits didn't. Art, my friends, is a gamble at times. Sometimes you win and sometimes you end up with things that feel a bit odd and you wonder what possessed you. Let me know in the comments what you think when you see the end results. Should they have stayed as pure clay? Oh hey, and if you've enjoyed any part of this video so far, please do consider hitting the like button, as it really does help me out. So I decided to paint my stumps yellow. I did a light shade and a deeper shade roughly brushed over it to help the swirly decorations stand out a bit better. Inside the bigger ghostie I painted a dark purple, which I do actually stand by because I think having the darker colour inside is rather a nice effect. However, I went a bit far and decided to add some pale purple on the outer edges too, and I think that's where I went a bit kaflooey. I don't seem to have footage of that bit either, so maybe my camera was trying to tell me something. And I wanted to put two very simple dots for eyes on the small shroom, but my brush was a bit hairy and kept splaying out on one side, and I kept needing to make them bigger to sort it out, and eventually I tried a kind of sleepy eye shape to try and fix it, and I also added some dots just around it in kind of purpley lilac, because by this point I think my brain was just in throw anything at it mode, and well, here we are. So I'm not fully sold on the look of them now. I'd almost like to just get a really good spray paint and make them blank slates again. But I also see a lot of good in them, so I'm on the fence. I still think they are super cute, and I especially love the floaty one. What do you think? Would you try and make one of these? If you've got this far in the video, you have my biggest thanks for watching. I really hope you'll come by again. Keep making happy, and I'll see you next time.